Welcome to this deep dive. We're so glad you are here with us today because, well, we are tackling something that I think absolutely every single human being has struggled with at some point.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right. I mean, have you ever wondered why it is just so remarkably easy to pick up a bad habit? Like scrolling on your phone for 2 hours before bed or grabbing that extra sugary snack in the middle of the
Ah,
afternoon?
the afternoon slump.
Exactly. But then it feels like moving a mountain to build a good one. Why is it that starting a new workout routine, or even just trying to read every day, feels like this uphill battle against your own brain?
It really is the universal human struggle, isn't it? We often feel like we are fighting our own biology.
We do.
And the real tragedy here is that we usually end up blaming ourselves. We sit there and think, I just don't have enough willpower, or I'm simply not disciplined enough. Like I lack the moral fiber to get this done.
That is such a common trap.
It is. But what if the problem isn't you at all? What if the problem is the entire framework you are using to try and change your behavior in the first place?
And that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We're going to completely dismantle the traditional, honestly exhausted advice you have always heard around setting massive, life-altering goals and relying on sheer white-knuckled willpower.
Which never works long term.
Never. Instead, we are looking at the hidden mechanics of systems, identity-based habits, and the incredibly profound mathematics of the 1% rule for success. Now, I know a lot of you listening are probably already familiar with some of the foundational concepts here.
Right, they are quite popular.
Yeah, we are pulling heavily from James Clear's groundbreaking work on atomic habits and the wisdom distilled in his really popular 321 newsletters. You probably know the basics of his framework. But we are going to look at the psychological traps hidden inside those concepts that rarely get talked about.
Exactly. We are looking at this through a much wider and I would say deeper lens today. So alongside the practical frameworks, we actually have real-life case studies from Level Up Living.
To see how everyday people are actually applying this.
Right. And struggling with these concepts in the real world, because theory is one thing, but practice is another.
But we certainly aren't stopping at the self-help level. We are going deep into the science today. I've got a critical psychological analysis here from the International Journal of Social Impact.
That one is fascinating.
It really is. It examines the foundational behavioral theories underlying all these strategies. And perhaps the part I'm most eager to get into later, we have a dense, cutting-edge neuroscientific study from the PMC database.
Oh, the brain mapping study.
Yes. It literally maps how the human brain physically processes, encodes, and overrides habits under intense time pressure.
Which means we aren't just going to rehash what you should do. We are going to explain the literal, physical, neurological shifts occurring in your basal ganglia when you attempt to change a routine.
Because true, lasting change is rarely about massive, exhausting action, right?
Right. It is almost always about subtle, systemic, and neurological shifts that happen consistently over time.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's jump right into this concept of goals versus systems. We all know the famous quote from the source material. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems.
A brilliant observation.
It is, but I want to push on this a little bit. Culturally, we are completely obsessed with goals. I mean, from a young age, it's all about the 5-year plan, visualizing the finish line, keeping your eyes on the prize. Are we really saying that having a goal is useless?
Not useless, no, but fundamentally flawed if it's your primary driver.
Okay, how so?
Well, a goal is entirely focused on a desired outcome, but
Yeah.
here is the critical, often overlooked flaw in outcome-driven thinking. Winners and losers both share the exact same goals.
Wow, that is a really sobering thought.
It really is. When you stop to think about it, every single athlete at the Olympic Games wants to win the gold medal. Every single candidate applying for a competitive corporate job wants the position.
They all have the exact same vision board.
Exactly. So if successful and unsuccessful people share the exact same goals, then the goal itself logically cannot be what differentiates them.
Right. If the goal was the magic ingredient, everyone who wanted to be a millionaire would be one. The desire is there, the outcome isn't. So if it's not the goal making the difference, it has to be the system.
Precisely. The system is the collection of daily, seemingly mundane, repetitive processes that actually lead to the results. Goals are just temporary possessions.
Like a trophy.
Right. Think about someone who trains for a marathon. Their goal is to cross that specific finish line. They train for months, they run the race, they get the commemorative medal. But what happens the next week?
They usually stop running entirely.
Yes.
I've seen it happen so many times. They post a photo on social media, everyone cheers, and then the running shoes go right into the back of the closet.
Because they achieved the goal. The goal was the only thing fueling the behavior. Once it's achieved, the motivation vanishes, causing a rapid relapse into old, sedentary patterns.
They were running to achieve a momentary blip on the radar.
Exactly. Not running to build a system of physical health.
Which brings us to the mathematical reality of systems, what the sources call the 1% rule. Now, we've all heard the math on this. If you get just 1% better every single day for 1 year because of compounding, you end up 37 times better by the end of the year.
The math is undeniable.
It is. And conversely, if you get 1% worse each day, you decline almost all the way down to 0. But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't there a real danger in this? If I am hyper-fixated on measuring a 1% improvement every single day, doesn't that just turn into another exhausting, toxic obsession with metrics? I mean, it sounds exhausting.
That is a brilliant point, and honestly, it's a very common trap people fall into when they first encounter this math.
So how do we avoid that?
The point of the 1% rule isn't to literally pull out a spreadsheet and calculate a 1.01 multiplier on your daily output.
Okay, good. Because I hate spreadsheets.
Most of us do. The human brain doesn't work that way, and trying to force it to will just lead to immediate burnout. What the math is actually doing is exposing a massive psychological blind spot we all have.
What's the blind spot?
As humans, we have a terrible, almost hardwired tendency to overestimate the importance of a single, massive defining moment. And we completely underestimate the value of making daily, minor improvements.
Because they don't feel like anything.
Right. A 1% improvement isn't particularly notable. In fact, it is usually entirely invisible.
You don't see your muscles growing after one workout.
You don't see your bank account ballooning after saving $10 instead of buying a coffee. Because the result isn't immediate, our brains naturally tell us the action was worthless.
So the 1% rule is a reminder.
It is a philosophical anchor to remind you that the invisible work is actually compounding even when your eyes can't see it yet.
We want the movie montage so badly. We want the Rocky training sequence where, in 3 minutes of screen time, he goes from out of shape to a heavyweight champion.
Cue the epic music.
Right. We want to sit through the thousands of hours of boring, untelevised jogging in the snow.
Exactly. And James Clear's 3-2-1 newsletter breaks this down beautifully into a battle between intensity versus consistency.
Intensity versus consistency.
We all crave the intense story. We want to say, I'm going to run a marathon next month. Or I'm going to lock myself in a cabin and write a novel in 30 days. Or I'm doing a strict 30-day silent meditation retreat in the mountains.
That is intensity.
Yes.
And intensity gets likes on social media. It gets gasps at a dinner party. People love hearing about it.
But intensity is exhausting. And more importantly, it is rarely sustainable. Consistency is what actually builds the system.
So instead of the dramatic 30-day silent retreat,
What about not missing 10 minutes of daily silence in your own living room for 2 years?
way less glamorous.
But way more effective. Instead of the marathon, what about simply not missing a 30-minute walk or light jog for a year? Intensity makes for a fantastic story you can tell people, but consistency is what actually makes progress in the dark, when no one is watching and no one is cheering for you.
I think the newsletter puts it perfectly. Intensity makes a good story. Consistency makes progress.
A great summary.
But even if we intellectually understand that we need these quiet, invisible systems, we so often derail ourselves by looking around at what everyone else is doing.
The comparison trap.
Exactly. The sources offer a really fascinating take on how we use comparison. Usually we're told that comparison is the thief of joy. End of story. Just don't do it. But the text argues that comparison can be either a vital tool or a devastating trap, depending entirely on how you deploy it.
Yes, the distinction between broad comparison and narrow comparison.
Let's break that down.
If you want to be utterly miserable, engage in broad comparison. Compare your overall career trajectory to a colleague who just got promoted. Compare your marriage to the highlight reel of a friend's anniversary post on Instagram.
Or compare your net worth to one of those 30 under 30 lists.
Exactly. That broad application of comparison completely strips you of your agency. You are looking at someone else's compounding results, their 37 times improvement, without seeing any of their daily invisible systems.
It just makes you feel like you're inherently defective rather than realizing you're just looking at the end of their math equation.
Right.
But there is a flip side to this. If you want to actually improve, you should use narrow comparison.
What's fascinating here is how narrow comparison changes the psychological dynamic. Narrow comparison is highly specific and tactical.
So you still look at successful people.
Yes, look at someone successful in your field, but don't compare your overall success to theirs. Compare your daily marketing strategy to theirs. Compare your email outreach cadence.
Or if you're an athlete, compare your footwork technique to theirs.
Exactly.
So when applied narrowly, comparison stops being the thief of joy and actually becomes the teacher of skills.
A teacher of skills, exactly.
You stop envying their outcome and you start dissecting their system. You look for that one little 1% tweak that you can borrow and plug into your own life.
You move from a state of passive envy to a state of active analysis. It's a highly productive state to be in.
Okay, let's unpack this further. If we want to build these consistent, unglamorous systems, and we know we can't rely on the dopamine hit of massive goals, where do we actually start?
The core shift.
Right,
Yeah.
the sources point to a core shift that needs to happen, and it's all about identity. We know the 3 layers of behavior change: outcomes, processes, and identity. Let's dig into that innermost layer.
This is perhaps the most profound psychological pivot in the entire atomic habit framework. The outermost layer is changing your outcomes. This is what you get.
Losing 20 pounds, publishing a book, winning a championship.
Right. Then the middle layer is changing your processes. This is what you do. Implementing a new routine at the gym, decluttering your desk for a better workflow.
And most people, when they want to change their lives, start at those outer layers.
They do. They say, I want to lose weight, which is the outcome. So I will go to the gym, which is the process.
It makes logical sense on the surface, but the innermost layer, the core of the onion, is changing your identity.
This is what you believe about yourself.
Your worldview, your self-image, your deeply held judgments about yourself and how you fit into the world.
And starting with identity is the ultimate behavioral hack.
Why is it a hack?
Because your current behaviors are simply a mirror image of your current identity. What you do on a daily basis is a direct reflection of the type of person you subconsciously believe that you are.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you walk around holding the belief that you are, quote, just bad at math, or you have an uncontrollable sweet tooth, or you are terrible with directions, you will unconsciously automatically build systems that prove those beliefs right.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Completely. To change your behavior permanently, you must change what you believe about yourself. You don't just want to read a book, you want to become a reader. You don't want to run a marathon, you want to become a runner.
I love the phrasing from the text on this. Every action is a vote for the type of person you wish to become.
It's powerful.
It really is. It's such a forgiving way to look at habit change.
Yeah.
You don't need a unanimous vote to win an election. You just need a majority. You don't need to be perfect. Every time you choose the good habit, you are casting a ballot for your new identity.
It bridges the gap beautifully between the 1% rule and long-term identity change.
How so?
Because no single instance, no single vote is going to magically transform a deeply held decades-old belief about yourself. Eating one salad doesn't suddenly rewire your brain to believe you are a health-conscious person.
I wish it did.
Don't we all? But as those small 1% votes door up over days, weeks, and months, the sheer weight of the evidence of your new identity emerges. You are quite literally proving to yourself who you are through undeniable physical action.
Let's make this incredibly concrete.
Yeah.
We have a real-life case study from the Level Up Living source that I want to spend some time on because I think it perfectly encapsulates how ridiculous yet how powerful this identity voting can be.
The story of Mike.
Yes, Mike. They share the story of a guy named Mike. Mike was a self-proclaimed, deeply entrenched couch potato. He actively hated exercise. It made him feel insecure, sweaty, and inadequate. But he hit a point where he knew he needed to change his physical health.
No, the old way, the outcome-based, intensity-driven way, would be Mike going out on January 1st, buying an expensive top-tier gym membership, getting all the new athletic gear, and declaring, I'm going to work out for an hour, 5 days a week.
We all know exactly how Mike's story ends if he does that. About January 14th, he's sore, he's exhausted, he misses one day because of work, feels like a complete failure, and the gym bag goes into the closet.
A classic mistake of intensity.
But Mike didn't do that. Instead, he shifted his focus entirely to identity. His new desired identity was remarkably simple. I am someone who moves daily.
Notice the phrasing there.
Yeah.
Not, I am an elite bodybuilder. Not, I am an Ironman triathlete. Just someone who moves. It lowers the bar for success to an incredibly accessible level.
Right. So, to cast a vote for that specific identity, what was his habit? What did he actually do? He did one push-up a day. That's it. One single push-up.
When you look at this from a physiological perspective, doing one push-up is almost laughable. It isn't going to build muscle mass. It isn't going to burn a measurable amount of calories. The physical effect of one push-up is effectively zero.
But the psychological effect is massive. Let's unpack the psychology of that. Why does something so small actually work? Because I can imagine sitting on the couch knowing I have to do my one push-up, and my brain just saying, this is stupid, why bother?
It works precisely because it bypasses the brain's resistance mechanisms.
The amygdala.
Yes. When you set a massive goal, your amygdala, the fear and resistance center of the brain, lights up. It sees a 1-hour gym session as a massive expenditure of energy and a potential threat to your comfort, so it throws up every excuse possible.
I'm too tired, I don't have time.
Exactly. But one push-up, it's so small, so insignificant, that it slips right past the amygdala's radar. The friction is incredibly low.
So he gets down on the floor, does one push-up, and stands back up. Takes 5 seconds.
Exactly. And in those 5 seconds, an undeniable transaction occurs in his brain. He drops down, does the push-up, and his subconscious registers. Oh, I guess we actually are the type of person who moves daily. We said we were going to do it, and we did it.
It isn't about the physical exertion.
No, it is about keeping a promise to yourself. Over months, that one push-up naturally evolved. Once he was already on the floor, some days he did 3, then 10, then he started taking walks.
Eventually, the case study notes, Mike was running 5Ks and even leading a local running group.
The identity grew not out of a massive burst of motivation, but because the tiny, undeniable votes accumulated to the point where his self-image permanently shifted.
He became a runner because he first proved to himself he was someone who just showed up.
Yeah.
It's all about building a foundation that won't crumble when the motivation inevitably fades.
A stable core.
Speaking of unshakable foundations, the 321 newsletter brings in a brilliant philosophy from Jeff Bezos. Now, Bezos isn't usually the first guy you think of for habit advice.
True.
But the strategic application here is fascinating. He once said that in business, he constantly gets asked what is going to change in the next 10 years. But he rarely gets asked the much more profound, much more important question.
Which is?
What is not going to change in the next 10 years?
It is a phenomenal strategic insight. Bezos realized that for a massive entity like Amazon, customers 10 years from now will still want low prices. They will still want vast selection, and they will still want fast delivery.
Nobody is going to wake up in a decade and say, you know what? I really wish Amazon's prices were higher and their shipping was a lot slower.
Because those specific desires are completely stable in time, a company can afford to pour massive amounts of energy, research, and capital into them today, knowing with absolute certainty they will pay dividends forever.
So how do we connect a corporate retail strategy to our personal deep dive on human habits?
By applying that exact same lens to your identity. If you build your habits around fleeting outcome-based goals, for example, I want to look good for my high school reunion next month, that goal is incredibly fragile.
The reunion will pass.
The motivation will evaporate. But if you build your habits around a core, stable identity like I am a reliable person, or I am a lifelong learner, or I am someone who deeply cares for their physical body, those identities are stable in time.
They won't suddenly become irrelevant in 10 years.
Therefore, the physical and emotional energy you invest in casting votes for those identities today will still be paying massive personal dividends a decade from now.
It's about investing your behavioral capital into appreciating assets rather than depreciating ones. Okay, let's pivot. We know we need to focus on systems. We know we need to aim for 1% consistency, and we know we need to cast these tiny votes for our desired identity.
The foundation is set.
But how do we actually construct these behaviors in the real world, minute to minute? We've talked about the what and the why, but let's get into the how.
This is where we transition from philosophy into structural psychology. The sources provide an incredibly practical framework called the 4 laws of behavior change.
Cue, craving, response, and reward.
Yes.
Yeah.
But rather than just list them out, I think it's crucial we map these practical steps directly onto foundational psychological theories from the International Journal of Social Impact.
To really bridge the gap between popular self-help and rigorous, peer-reviewed behavioral science. I completely agree. Let's look at law number 1. Make it obvious. This deals with the cue stage of the habit loop. The problem we run into is that our brains are almost too efficient. Once we do something a few times, it gets pushed into our unconscious mind to save cognitive energy. which means a lot of our bad habits are entirely unconscious.
We don't even realize we're doing them.
Right. You don't consciously decide to pull your phone out of your pocket while waiting in line at the grocery store. Your hand just does it while your conscious mind is thinking about what to make for dinner.
The first step to changing a habit is to forcefully drag those unconscious behaviors back into the light of conscious awareness.
The sources talk about a fascinating real-world example of this from Japan. It's a railway safety system called pointing and calling. The train operators literally physically point at different signals, speedometers, and track switches, and they verbally call out their status out loud. Signal is green. Speed is 80.
It seems incredibly redundant.
It does, but it forces conscious awareness onto actions that would otherwise become dangerously automatic.
And it reduces errors dramatically. For an individual trying to change their habits, this translates to creating a habit scorecard. You don't judge yourself, you simply write down everything you do in a given day. Wake up, turn off alarm, look at phone, go to bathroom, make coffee.
You are pointing and calling your own life to see what is actually happening.
Okay, so once you are aware of your baseline, you need to create obvious cues for the new habits you want to build.
I was reading the piece from the International Journal of Social Impact, and they connect this perfectly to a psychological concept called implementation intention, originally formulated by Peter M. Gollwitzer.
Yes. Gollwitzer's research showed that if you just have a vague, generalized goal like, I really want to exercise more this week, you are essentially relying on chance. You are hoping you feel motivated at some arbitrary point in the future.
Which rarely happens.
But an implementation intention explicitly pairs the desired behavior with a highly specific time and location. The formula is, I will do behavior at time and location.
So I will work out for 20 minutes at 6 a.m. in my living room.
Exactly. You are preloading the decision. You are doing the cognitive heavy lifting of deciding when and where ahead of time so that when 6 a.m. rolls around, you don't have to suffer through decision fatigue. The environment itself becomes the cue.
And there's an even more powerful, tightly woven version of this called habit stacking. Instead of trying to pair a new habit with a specific time on the clock, which can still be easily ignored, you pair it with an existing habit you already do automatically every single day without fail.
The formula shifts too. After current habit, I will do new habit.
We have a fantastic case study here of Sarah, a busy mom and freelance graphic designer. She was constantly stressed and had absolutely zero time for self-care. She wanted to start meditating, but finding a random 20 minutes in her chaotic day was impossible.
But she already had a rock-solid, deeply ingrained daily habit, right?
Exactly. Making her morning coffee. She never missed it. It was practically a biological necessity for her. So she stacked her new, fragile habit right on top of his strong, existing one.
What was her rule?
After I turn on the coffee maker, I will sit at the kitchen table and do a 5-minute guided meditation while it brews.
And it worked brilliantly for her because the cue was already wired into her nervous system. She didn't have to set an alarm or rely on an app notification to remember to meditate.
The physical sound of the coffee machine groaning to life literally became the auditory trigger.
For her brain to sit down and breathe, she hijacked an existing neural pathway.
Okay, let's unpack Law 2. Make it attractive. This tackles the craving stage of the habit loop. Let's be honest, a lot of the habits we need to build, doing taxes, running, organizing spreadsheets, are fundamentally not attractive. How do we manufacture a craving for something difficult?
This brings us to a really fascinating distinction in behavioral economics. We can look at David Premack's Premack principle.
The Premack principle.
This principle essentially states that you can encourage a low probability, less preferred behavior by offering a high probability, highly preferred behavior as a reward afterward. It is the classic grandma's rule.
You must eat your broccoli first, and only then can you have a slice of chocolate cake.
Exactly. But there is a modern upgrade to this that I think is much more effective for adults. Coined by Catherine Milkman at the University of Pennsylvania, it's called temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling.
Instead of doing the reward after the chore, you do the preferred task simultaneously with the less preferred one. You bundle the temptation and the chore together into one package.
It's incredibly practical. You make a rule that you're only allowed to listen to your absolute favorite true crime podcast while you are doing the dishes or running on the treadmill.
Or you are only allowed to get a pedicure while you are clearing out your email inbox.
The intense temptation of the podcast, or the pampering, actually bleeds over and makes the boring chore feel genuinely attractive in the moment.
That's a great individual strategy, but the sources also dive heavily into the social aspect of making things attractive. This connects directly back to Albert Bandura's social learning theory.
Bandura's work is foundational here.
We are profoundly social creatures, and we are fundamentally wired to imitate the norms of the people around us.
Bandura's work highlights that we constantly scan our environment to see what others are doing, primarily to ensure our own survival and social standing.
And the sources specify that we imitate three distinct groups. The close, our immediate family and friends; the many, the broader tribe or society; and the powerful, those with high status and prestige.
Which means if you want to make a habit attractive, the ultimate undeniable shortcut is to join a culture or a community where your desired behavior is simply their normal, everyday behavior.
Absolutely. If you want to read more books, don't just sit alone in your room trying to force yourself to read. Join a local book club.
If you want to get fit, don't just buy a solitary gym membership. Join a running group or a CrossFit box.
When the normal behavior of your immediate tribe perfectly aligns with your newly desired behavior, the internal friction drops to near zero.
Because sticking to the habit suddenly socially rewards you with inclusion.
Belonging and acceptance. And biologically, we crave belonging almost as much as we crave food.
If everyone around you is talking about the book they read this week, reading becomes the path of least resistance to social connection. Speaking of the path of least resistance, that leads us perfectly into Law 3. Make it easy.
This is all about the response stage, the actual execution of the habit.
This might be the most crucial law for long-term sustainability.
And it is deeply tied to the psychological concept of decision fatigue. Human willpower is not an infinite well you can draw from endlessly. It is a finite, highly depletable resource.
If you spend your entire day making complex decisions at work, negotiating with toddlers, or navigating traffic, your self-control reserves are utterly depleted by 7:00 p.m.
Which is why you plan to cook a healthy meal at 9 a.m., but by 7:00 p.m. you are ordering a pizza. Your willpower is just gone.
Gone. Therefore, you cannot rely on willpower to drive your habits. It will always fail you eventually. Instead, you must rely on environment design.
The environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. If you design your environment correctly, the right choice becomes the default, low-energy choice.
We have some great practical examples in the text of reducing friction through visual cues. It's about making the good choice easy and the bad choice incredibly hard.
If you want to read before bed instead of looking at your phone, don't just leave the book on the shelf.
In the morning, put the book literally on your pillow. When you go to bed, you physically have to move the book to get in.
If you want to practice guitar, take it out of the case in the closet and put the guitar stand right in the middle of your living room.
And conversely, you increase friction for bad habits.
Yeah.
If you want to watch less television, unplug it after every use and put the remote control inside a drawer in another room. The sheer annoyance of having to plug it back in is often enough to deter a depleted brain.
Let's look at Priya, a college student from our case studies. She was failing her classes because she was losing hours every single night to social media scrolling while she was supposed to be studying.
She tried to rely on willpower. She told herself, I just won't look at my phone.
And of course that failed. Her willpower was depleted from classes.
So she stopped trying to be more disciplined and started designing her environment to aggressively increase friction for the bad habit. She deleted the social apps from her phone entirely.
She installed website blockers on her laptop that triggered after 6:00 p.m.
And most importantly, when she sat down to study, she literally left her phone in a completely different room, plugged into a charger behind a couch.
By increasing the number of physical steps required to access social media, having to get up, walk to another room, dig behind the couch, re-download the app, she made the bad habit incredibly difficult.
The text notes her screen time dropped by 40% almost overnight. She didn't gain more willpower, she just changed the architecture of her room.
On the flip side, let's look at how to make good habits absurdly easy. The sources highlight James, a software engineer who desperately wanted to eat healthier but kept choosing the drive-thru after long shifts.
He applied what is called the 2-minute rule. The 2-minute rule states that you should downscale any new habit until it takes under 2 minutes to start.
Exactly. James didn't try to suddenly become a gourmet chef cooking complex macro-balanced meals every night. That was way too much friction. Instead, he just prepped simple smoothie packs on Sunday afternoons.
He threw spinach, fruit, and protein powder into bags and tossed them in the freezer.
On a Tuesday night, when he came home exhausted, grabbing a bag, dumping it in the blender with water, and hitting the button took under 2 minutes.
He literally made the good habit, a healthy dinner, require less time and less physical energy than sitting in the drive-thru line at a fast food place.
The The 2-minute rule is a brilliant psychological trick because it recognizes a fundamental truth. A habit must be established before it can be improved.
You cannot optimize a behavior that doesn't exist yet.
You can't worry about perfect running form if you haven't mastered the art of simply putting your shoes on and stepping out the door. By making it absurdly easy to start, you master the art of showing up.
Master the art of showing up. I love that. Okay, finally, Law 4. Make it satisfying. This addresses the reward stage. If a behavior isn't satisfying, we simply won't repeat it.
This goes all the way back to B.F. Skinner and the foundational theories of operant conditioning. It's basic human wiring. If we do something and immediately get a hit of feeling good, our brain flags that neural pathway and says, hey, whatever we just did, let's make sure we do that again tomorrow.
A behavior is highly likely to be repeated when it is promptly and positively reinforced. But here's the massive problem with good habits. The true reward is usually delayed by months or even years.
You don't get the six-pack after one workout.
You don't get the fluent Spanish after one language lesson.
Yeah.
But bad habits. The reward is immediate. The sugar hits your bloodstream instantly. The dopamine from the social media, is immediate.
Yeah.
Cost is in the future, but the reward is now.
Exactly. Our brains evolved in a return immediate environment, but we live in a return delayed society. So to build a good habit, you have to artificially manufacture immediate satisfaction to trick your primitive brain into repeating the behavior.
And the best way the sources suggest doing this is with habit tracking. We see this with Raj, an investor from the case studies who wanted to stop frivolous, impulsive spending.
He didn't just tell himself to try to spend less and wait until the end of the month to see if his bank account looked better. The delay was too long.
Instead, he tracked every single expense. And every day he had a no-spend day, meaning he only bought absolute essentials. He got to put a big, shiny gold star sticker on a physical wall calendar in his kitchen.
It sounds incredibly childish, doesn't it? A grown man working in finance using gold star stickers. But the psychology is airtight. The visual completion of the task provides an immediate, tangible dopamine hit.
He didn't have to wait 30 days to feel successful. He felt successful at 8 p.m. every night when he placed the sticker.
The visual streak, the chain of stars on the calendar, becomes its own reward. You become fiercely protective of the streak. You don't want to break the chain.
And when life inevitably happens, and you do break the chain because you got sick or had an emergency, the golden rule from the text is, never miss twice.
A single lapse is just a mistake. It's a blip. But missing twice is the beginning of an entirely new, bad habit.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. So we've mapped out the behavioral psychology quite thoroughly. We understand the cues, the cravings, the power of environment design, and operant conditioning. But this naturally raises a much deeper question. We know what to do, but what is physically, biologically happening inside the skull when Priya unplugs her phone, or when Mike does his one push-up? What does a habit actually look like in the wetware of the human brain?
This is the part I have been waiting for. Let's move into the neuroscience. Thanks to a dense, incredibly rigorous, peer-reviewed study from the PMC archive, we actually have a map of what is happening in the brain. And it is wild.
It truly is. The study looks at the profound, literal competition taking place in our brains between two distinct systems: the computationally demanding, highly flexible, goal-directed system, and the rapid, deeply ingrained, but highly inflexible habit system.
When you have a deeply entrenched bad habit, overriding it is not just a matter of trying harder. There is a literal, measurable physiological cost and friction inside your neural pathways.
To measure this friction, the researchers designed an experiment that is both brilliant and slightly hilarious. I'm going to call it the alien cookie experiment.
The alien cookie experiment, yes.
They took human subjects, slid them inside a functional MRI machine to scan their brain activity in real time, and had them play a fast-paced video game. In the game, they had to feed various alien characters specific color-coded cookies to earn rewards: gold, diamonds, or silver coins.
But here's the crucial variable. They were under intense time pressure. When an alien appeared on screen, the participant only had 600 milliseconds to choose the correct cookie.
Just over half a second.
Right. And that time pressure is the key to the whole study. Goal-directed thinking, which involves evaluating options, remembering complex rules, and projecting future outcomes, is a very slow, metabolically expensive process for the brain.
Habitual responding, on the other hand, is lightning fast.
By forcing a 600 millisecond window, the researchers essentially disabled the subjects' slow, goal-directed systems and forced their brains to rely entirely on automatic habits.
Okay, so they are rapid-fire feeding these aliens. During the training phase, the researchers created two different conditions. Some cookie alien pairings were lightly trained, which they called the standard trained condition.
But other pairings were heavily repeated, drilled into the subject's brains over and over again, 3.5 times more often than the standard ones.
This was the overtrained condition, designed to artificially mimic a deep, ingrained automatic habit.
So the participants are buzzing along, feeding cookies, earning gold, completely operating on autopilot with these overtrained habits. The neural grooves are being carved deep. And then the researchers pull the rug out from under them in what they call the devaluation phase.
This is where it gets cruel. Suddenly, the screen flashes, and the researchers tell the participant, "Hey, that gold you've been working so hard for, the market crashed. It is now worth 0 points. Do not collect gold anymore."
This is a classic partial reversal test in behavioral neuroscience. Now, put yourself in the participant's shoes. Your conscious, goal-directed brain knows the gold is worthless. You explicitly know you should stop choosing the overtrained response that leads to the gold alien.
But because of this 600 millisecond time pressure and the heavy overtraining, your habit system is screaming at your hands to just execute the automatic response anyway.
It's like when you move to a new apartment, but after a long, exhausting day at work, you accidentally drive all the way to your old house. Your conscious brain knows you moved, but your autopilot just took over the steering wheel.
That is the perfect analogy. And what the researchers measured in the fMRI was something called the RT switch cost, the response time switch cost.
When participants had to suddenly stop doing the overtrained habit and choose a different cookie, it took them significantly longer to override it compared to overriding the lately trained standard habit.
But wait, how do they explain that delay? Is it just the person being confused for a second?
It's much deeper than simple confusion. This delay, this RT switch cost, is the literal physical friction of the goal-directed brain fiercely wresting control back from the habitual brain. To explain this, the researchers used something called drift diffusion modeling.
Okay, I need an explain, like I'm 5 for drift diffusion modeling and the accumulation to threshold mechanism they mentioned in the paper. That is heavy jargon.
Fair enough. Think of a habit like water carving a canyon over thousands of years. The overtrained habit has carved a very deep, very smooth canyon in your brain. When a cue happens, the water, your neural signal, wants to rush down that deep canyon immediately because it's the path of least resistance.
That is the accumulation to threshold. It hits the threshold instantly.
Because the canyon is so deep.
Right.
Now suddenly the researchers tell you the gold is worthless. You have to stop the water from going down the canyon.
To do that, your goal-directed brain has to rapidly build a massive dam of counter-evidence. It has to flood the system with new signals to push the water out of the deep canyon and into a new shallow ditch.
The RT switch cost, that physical delay, is the measurable time it takes your brain to build that dam and reroute the water against immense physical momentum.
That is incredible. So where is this epic battle actually taking place? When we look at the fMRI scans, which parts of the brain are lighting up? Where's the canyon and where's the dam?
The scans reveal distinct competing neural networks. When a habit is being formed and smoothly executed on autopilot during the training phase, the brain activity is centered in the sensorimotor cortex and deep in the primitive part of the brain called the basal ganglia, specifically a region called the posterior putamen.
This is the habit circuit. It's efficient, it's fast, and it doesn't require deep conscious thought.
That's the factory floor running on automated machines.
Exactly. Conversely, when participants were executing the less trained standard behaviors, they actually had to think about it. The fMRI showed activation in higher order areas, the posterior caudate, the insula, and prefrontal regions like the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
This is the goal-directed circuit at work, the CEO of the brain analyzing data.
But what happens during that devaluation phase? When the gold becomes worthless and the CEO has to yell at the factory floor to hit the emergency brakes on the overtrained habit.
This is the massive breakthrough of the study. Overriding an overtrained habit isn't just a matter of the prefrontal CEO simply turning off the putamen. It requires a highly specific, dynamic interplay. The researchers observed a specific cortical network orchestrating the expression of the habit.
But when the participants successfully overrode the deeply ingrained habit, a completely different pathway fired up. The left premotor cortex, or PMC, heavily engaged and communicated down to the putamen to shut it down.
The left PMC. And this leads to the most sci-fi, unsettling, mind-blowing part of the entire deep dive. The researchers didn't just observe the brain passively, they actively hacked it.
They did. They utilized an intervention called transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS.
This involves taking a physical electromagnetic coil and placing it directly against the subject's scalp to safely but temporarily alter the magnetic field and therefore the neural electrical activity in a highly specific region of the brain.
They targeted the left PMC, the very area they suspected was the biological gatekeeper for habit modulation.
They shot a magnet at the brain, and what happened?
They stimulated the PMC, and the results were incredible. By actively stimulating and disrupting that specific area of the left PMC with a magnet, they actually improved the participants' accuracy in overriding their bad habits.
It's almost unsettling to think about it that way. We like to think of ourselves as free-thinking, sovereign individuals who make choices based on our moral character. But you're saying we can literally turn off our stubbornness, turn off our bad habits with a magnet.
It profoundly challenges our perception of free will and discipline. By applying inhibitory TMS to the PMC, the researchers suppressed the rapid, automatic habit-related signals.
In doing so, they essentially temporarily disabled the brain's autopilot mechanism. Without the autopilot screaming to go down the deep canyon, the brain was forced to rely on the slower, goal-directed, conscious thought processes.
By physically altering the brain's magnetic field over the premotor cortex, they definitively proved that this region plays a causal, biological role in both how we acquire a habit and how we can successfully reverse it.
It demonstrates that failing to break a bad habit isn't just a lack of moral fiber or willpower. It is a physical circuit, a deep canyon that can literally be measured and magnetically modulated.
Your habits are literally carving physical pathways in your meatware.
Okay, this has been an incredible journey from philosophy to psychology to literal brain surgery with magnets. But before we wrap up, we absolutely must cover our blind spots.
We have talked a lot about individual responsibility, environment design, and brain hacking. But if we leave it there, we are doing a disservice to the broader reality of how humans live. We need to look at the vital systemic critique brought up in the International Journal of Social Impact.
It is so crucial to maintain a critical lens, especially
Yeah.
with self-help frameworks that become this popular. The atomic habit framework, while undeniably incredibly effective for many, relies heavily on a Western, highly individualistic mindset.
It operates on the foundational assumption that an individual has immense, almost total autonomous control over their personal environment and their daily schedule.
Right, the whole premise of Make It Easy is that if you just design your environment perfectly, you will succeed. Put the apples on the counter, put the phone in the other room, and boom, you are optimized.
But that perspective can sometimes aggressively ignore massive systemic barriers. Let's look at socioeconomic limitations. What if you were a single parent working 3 part-time jobs just to make rent?
You literally cannot control your schedule. You cannot control your environment because you are constantly moving between chaotic, high-stress workplaces.
The advice to just optimize your morning routine feels not just unhelpful, but borderline insulting when your morning routine consists of just surviving until the next shift. Poverty acts as an immediate friction multiplier on every good habit.
That context is so important, and it's not just economic. The paper also touches on medical and neurological realities. What happens to make it obvious when someone has clinical ADHD?
It's a great example. For a neurotypical brain, putting a visual cue like a guitar in the middle of the room works. But for someone with ADHD who struggles with executive dysfunction and object permanence, that guitar might become invisible background noise within 2 days.
Or consider someone battling severe clinical depression. The executive functioning required to pre-prep smoothie bags or meticulously track habits on a calendar is literally neurologically compromised. The cognitive energy simply isn't there.
So while James Clear's tools are profoundly powerful and have helped millions, we must ethically remember they are not a universal cure-all. They do not magically erase systemic inequality or legitimate medical realities.
It's a tool in the toolbox, not a magic wand. I appreciate us taking the time to unpack that. The psychology paper also brings up one final, fascinating strategic dilemma that I want to explore before we finish. It's called the explore-exploit trade-off.
Yes, in behavioral science and even in computer science algorithms, the explore-exploit trade-off asks a fundamental question about how you allocate your finite time and energy.
It asks, do you exploit the habits, systems, and knowledge you already have because you know they yield a reliable, positive result?
Or do you take a risk and explore entirely new knowledge and behaviors that might serve you better in the long run, but carry the massive risk of failure and wasted energy in the short term?
It's a tightrope walk, because if you only ever exploit your good habits, If you just stick to the perfect morning routine and the exact same workout every single day for 10 years, you become a highly optimized robot stuck in a rut. You never innovate. You never discover anything new.
But if you only ever explore, if you are constantly jumping from one new diet to another, reading the first chapter of 50 different books, changing your career path every 6 months, you never build consistency.
You never hit the 37 times compounding interest of the 1% rule, and you never actually master anything.
What's the answer?
True mastery requires balancing both. You must build atomic habits to automate the fundamentals of your life. You exploit what works for your health, your finances, your daily chores, so that your cognitive load is freed up.
And then you use that freed up energy to aggressively explore new, creative, and challenging frontiers.
And when we explore those new frontiers, we are inevitably going to make mistakes. I want to pull one final gem from the 321 newsletter to close out this deep dive. James Clear quotes Machiavelli, who advised that when we act, we should aim to make mistakes of ambition rather than mistakes of sloth.
A mistake of ambition is failing at a massive goal. It's spending a year creating a project or writing a book or launching a business that nobody ends up wanting. It hurts, it's public, and it costs capital, but is active.
A mistake of sloth, on the other hand, is simply not attempting the goal in the first place. It is spending your entire life consuming other people's content instead of contributing or creating anything of your own.
Mistakes of ambition actually teach you something. They give you data you can use to refine your systems. Mistakes of sloth just comfort you while you slowly stagnate.
Though tying it back to our systemic critique, it's worth noting that making a mistake of ambition is a privilege. Not everyone has the financial safety net to launch a business that fails.
But in the micro moments of our own lives, choosing to try the new hobby and looking foolish is a mistake of ambition we can mostly all afford.
It is a profound reminder that building good systems isn't about achieving a sterile, risk-free perfection. It is about building a strong enough baseline foundation so that you can actually afford to take ambitious risks.
What a monumental deep dive this has been. We have completely dismantled the myth of goals. We learned that winners and losers have the exact same goals, but the winners rely on the quiet math of the 1% rule, letting tiny systems compound in the dark over time.
We learned that the deepest layer of behavior change is your identity, and that every action you take, even something as ridiculous as just one push-up a day, is a literal vote for the type of person you wish to become.
We connected the 4 laws of behavior change to foundational psychology, from implementation intentions to temptation bundling and operant conditioning.
And we explored the literal physical neuroplasticity of the brain, seeing how overtrained habits carve deep canyons in the putamen, and how overriding them requires the heavy lifting of the premotor cortex, something that can even be manipulated with magnetic stimulation.
So as you go about your day-to-day, as you look at your kitchen, your phone, your workspace, what are you going to do with this information?
Think of the ultimate outcome you are hoping to achieve in your life right now. Look at your daily routines. Is there a path to accomplishing your desired identity where you could deliberately design less friction? Ask yourself honestly, are you just tolerating your flaws, or are you actively, systemically improving them 1% at a time?
I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. James Clear notes that reading a good book is like downloading a software update for your brain. And today, we've learned that your habits literally wire the physical neurocircuitry of your basal ganglia.
So as you get better at this, as your brain offloads more and more of your daily life to automatic, non-conscious habits in order to become hyper-efficient, are you actually gaining more free will to pursue your true goals?
Or are you just becoming a highly optimized, predictable machine? Next time you seamlessly complete a habit without even thinking about it, pause for a second and ask yourself, who is really driving right now? You or your meticulously designed environment?
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.
Until next time, keep exploring.